Chapter 2 of my European holiday in 2024. A familiar position up and down on an aircraft, I arrived in Nantes, my stop on the way to Rennes. I clarified my journey with a nice lady at the customer services at the airport, who seemed a little flustered when I spoke to her, in my poor French once more. I had an hour to pass before I boarded my train to Rennes from Nantes, itself another hour journey. In that time, I walked around and found a Commonwealth memorial at a nearby cemetery. I paid a visit, wondering if there were any Anzacs buried here. From the cemetery, I made my way and explored a nearby park, taking in the various sights and smells of this small, very pretty area. As my spare hour came to an end, I made a return to the train station and then took a train to Rennes. My reason to travel to this part of France was solely to visit and spend time with a friend, a reunion years in the making. My introduction to Rennes was a delightful creperie, where we shared galettes with cold cut ham, cheese, egg and bacon, followed by two different types of crepes, a sugar and butter and a cream crepe, similar to the cream you can find within an almond croissant, frangipane. I also tried local cider and beer, both beverages quite prominent in the area, capping off a wonderful meal. Having looked at what was nearby to Rennes, and having my parents highly recommend visiting Mont Saint-Michel from the year before, I was desperate to go. However, the transport getting there was not smooth sailing, and my friend recommended I visit the coastal town of Saint-Malo instead, a 1-hour train ride northwest, and much easier to get to. On this day, venturing towards Saint-Malo, the weather was very Melbourne-like, a mixture of sunshine, cloud and drizzling rain. A short walk from the station brought me to the old walled city. Not quite what I was expecting, to be honest. I was still thinking of Mont Saint-Michel, and how the loss of a day due to the EasyJet cancellation from Nice to Nantes cost me the opportunity to visit both it and Saint-Malo. I digress. The walls of Saint-Malo were grand, and the town had a classic medieval look and feel with cobblestone streets, that architecture, ramparts, and a dominant cathedral. I started walking the perimeter at first, and then found cool views of the landscape before zigzagging some of the streets. I visited my friend's recommendation for a nice cafe and a swanky bar, trying local whiskey and crepes. A chèvre galette, goat cheese, and a flambé rhum crepe, which was very, very cool and very tasty. The chef there was a kind man, allowing me to perhaps overstay as I caught up with my diary. I then purchased some souvenirs and returned to Rennes. I met my friend's partner, who returned from working in Paris. We got along nicely, with a few shared interests. Together, they gave me a small tour of Rennes, describing good locations and venues for activities, and deciding on the Fox pub, perhaps the only English pub in town, for dinner. Local beer, a cheese board, and a nice burger for a meal capped off a great evening. The next day, I slept in a little, not rushing my afternoon departure out of Rennes. I shared some Vegemite with my friends, who, to my surprise, did not mind it, although preferring it for later in the day and not for petit déjeuner or breakfast. My friend gave me a few recommendations for streets and parks to walk around and witness, which I did for a couple of hours. A pleasant time in the sun. I returned back for lunch, pesto pasta with tomatoes. I said my farewells not long after, and took a cosy 1-hour train ride to Paris. My next destination was Valence, about a 1 hour's drive south of Lyon. This required a connecting train from Paris. Unfortunately, this journey was delayed, followed by missing baggage while stationary on the platform. Prior to the delay, I had some angst about reaching my connecting train earlier, and this was completely put to ease once this delay took place. The train rides of the day were pleasant, fast, and efficient. Valence, where another friend of mine greeted me. I was driven to the family home in Ardèche, introduced to everyone there, and was provided a greeting drink and toast, Ricard. It's a licorice type aperitif, and quite an unusual taste. Dinner was radish, potato and lamb, or beef with digestive liquor, along with beer, wine, bread and cheese. The latter two a staple of my stay. Humbly, the family proclaimed that they had poor English, but it was instead my limited French I felt gave me only just a pass, and I found it very difficult to reciprocate the native tongue. In saying all that, I was thoroughly enjoying conversing in my broken French lingo. It was great company, and the stories shared were enjoyable. Very quickly I had the feeling that I was in for a few nice days. The next day was sprouted with le pain et marmalade, lots of high quality and fresh bread, and juicy homemade jam. Our day started by visiting the local farm where the family worked, meeting more of the family and friends. They all seemed to be having a very joyful time together, with a stunning backdrop, the sun shining upon them, and just blue and greenery all around them. Ideal nature. The next stop was the castle overlooking the town, Château de Cresol, which overlooked Ardèche and Valence. My friend and I then went for lunch at a bakery and drove further to a chapel perched on a hill. It too overlooked more of the beautiful French countryside. Mountains, valleys, the Rhône River, cities and farms filled the landscape. It was beautiful. We ate lunch there under the sunshine and breezing wind. The next stop was exploring Valence itself. It is a cute place, large without being overbearing. Napoleon studied at the military academy here leading up to the French Revolution in 1789, and there's some artwork and memorials and statues built to commemorate his time here. My friend and I stopped for an espresso when emergency services blasted into the main plaza where we were. We then got a little rained on before going home, and would eventually make dinner plans at the restaurant below the Château de Cresol on the hill. A delicious share plate of lamb and vegetables with sparkling wine, rounding off with a picturesque view of the night sky smiling down upon the countryside. It's now the 1st of June, and this day required an earlier start as my friend and I set course for Palais Idyle du Facteur Cheval and Aix-les-Bains. The former is a stunning piece of work by one man, insanely possessed in constructing this artistic piece by hand for over 30 years, I think with the help of some family. From mythical to living animals, the architecture from around the world, and musings on life, it had it all. Even his tomb was preemptively made by Monsieur Cheval, which sits not too far from the palace of his construction. A very talented postman, Monsieur Cheval. Driving continued as we went to Aix-les-Bains, not too far from Annecy, Geneva and the mountains. It was a scenic drive. Aix-les-Bains is a tranquil town situated on a large lake, Lac du Bourget, teeming with greenery and aquatic blue. A motorbike exhibit was thriving, as were restaurants, cafes and ice creameries. My friend and I walked for a while, settling on a bistro restaurant with a fairly peeved waiter who mustn't have been having too good of a day. We both ordered a ceviche de bar, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, cold served raw trout and salmon in a circle, draped in olive oil and vegetables, and a side of rather unique chips, at least to me. Either way, it was delicious, as was the blonde beer we also ordered. After our lunch, we proceeded to continue walking along the lake until we hit a dead end, soaking up many good viewpoints of the lake and surrounding hills, mountains, docks, boats and rafts. An ice cream capped off our time at Aix-les-Bains before the 2.5 hour drive back to Ardèche. There, the family warmly greeted us upon our return. Dinner again was elaborate: bread, tomato, homemade mayonnaise, beef, potato or pasta cheese, and many beverages of Ricard, vin blanc et rouge, and digestifs, white and red wine, along with digestive liquor for those not quite sure what I was saying there. I ate a lot, enjoying the family's company and hospitality and their fresh produce. Their collective English was very good this evening, with even the parents understanding me better than the night before, and they all said my French was getting better than I realised, which was reassuring, given I'd laboured for over 1,000 days with Duolingo. I shared my Aussie gifts towards the end of the evening, before retiring for the day. The next day was a bit of a sleep-in, and deferred breakfast in favour of what was to become a large family lunch. Coffee got me through, as it often does. I packed my things, ready for departure, spent time with the family, whilst my friend came back from the shops with some surprise goods for my journey ahead, leaving Ardèche to my next adventure. Lunch was big, many cheeses, bread, tomatoes, mayonnaise, garlic dips, fish dips, crisps, and more. Plus, of course, some vino. It was stunningly good. Afterwards, I exchanged my thanks with the family, thanking my hosts profusely for looking after me and treating me so well. Like one of their own, really. My friend drove me to the train station, and it was there that we parted ways. Stopping briefly in Lyon, my next destination was Paris. Again, Gare de Lyon train station. I had a few hours to catch up on some administration, which allowed me to book a few next steps in my journey. I bought a particular gift for my mother, which she dearly missed not purchasing a year earlier when she voyaged to France. I then took the somewhat familiar metro, which I'm familiar in the sense that I'd taken it before, to Paris-Orly Airport. Not my first time in this historic city, there was something about Paris that made me just feel a little bit uneasy. On one hand, it is historic and beautiful, but on the other hand, it is large, noisy, and dirty. I couldn't live here, I thought to myself. Maybe it was the countryside and the smaller towns that I had been living in for the last few days that had awed me so much. The big city itself just didn't excite me as it once did. Time was in surplus at Paris-Orly, so I took it slow, spoke with a fellow traveller, Layla from Tunisia, played some Gran Turismo 6 on a console at the terminal, watched as a man got aggravated about having an excessive carry-on whilst trying to board. He caused quite the scene. As I boarded the plane for my next destination, I had a window seat. I was able to gaze upon the cityscape of Paris, shining bright with life. The Eiffel Tower glittering me a wave goodbye. So many millions of people out there. It was now 10:30 in the evening, dusk was truly settling in, and eventually the French countryside fell from view. Flying in a northern direction, as the skyline grew brighter and brighter by the hour, I began to feel excitement brew inside of me for my next chapter and adventure. One that would be far cooler, far quieter, and far, far away. I began to reflect on the journey thus far. Nice, Monaco, Rennes, Ardeche. I thought of the people I had met and reacquainted with, and how in such a brief period of time I'd forged potential lifelong friends and core memories to savour. This is one of the great allures of travel. Seeing historic sites, captivating events, and breathtaking nature is wonderful, but it's the people that bring these places to life along the way.